Here I am, Ellouise Schoettler, back again to tell you a story. And I'll take off my mask. It's hard to give that up. I'm going to just keep them in my pocket until we're assured that we don't need them anymore. That would be nice, won't it? I'll put my glasses up here because I think I'm going to have to use them. I came and changed my mind about what I was going to tell a story about. And some things came through my mind. Yesterday, I was thinking that just several days before, I had received a surprise letter. Here I was sitting in the car waiting for my daughter at the Safeway in Kensington, while she was picking up the groceries. And I had received a note from a friend that I had gone to school with in Charlotte through many levels of school. And this guy's name's Jerry. Some years ago, 20 years, maybe more than that, he had adopted a job for himself. That every time our group, our age, our group from our school, he would let us know if anyone had left, if we had lost one of our people. At first, I didn't like his doing that. It sort of hurt a lot to keep finding, I don't live there anymore, was picking it up. And then the more that he did, the more I learned that this was an incredibly generous man, a caring person, and that he was doing us a huge favor. So I could appreciate everything that he was doing. So 2 or 3 days ago, I got an email from him letting me know that we had lost another member. Now, the funny thing about that, when it happened, I knew him. I knew most everybody, but this particular one had lived in my neighborhood. That we some grew groups, and it turned out that this guy lived down the street, across the street from my cousin. And then down the street from that was another girl that was in my group. And then down the street was a guy who was in my group from the seventh grade forward. It was a friendly group. We all knew each other. And you know that there's stories, their memories, their stories connected through all of those things. And I started to remember what I did know about this guy that had just gone on. Um, he worked in the radio. By the time he was in the a text teenager, then he was on the radio as an announcer. And later, he went to college. He was in the Navy, when all the guys were brought in, then he was in the Navy. And when he went to work after that, he was working as an announcer for Voice of America. And any a reunion, we'd meet each other, everybody would meet, we'd exchange stories. The net was never torn completely. Does that happen with you? Do you know all the people or can bring back a memory for all those people? It's really fabulous, isn't it? I like that very much. So, memories and stories, we all have them, and they're connections. They make bonds. Now, in my family, my Aunt Katherine rarely forgot anything or any person that she'd ever known. You could count on her 100%. She's my father's sister. She's a special woman in my mind. I loved her dearly. She was funny. and she knew everything you needed to know. Now, I didn't need to ask her questions quite as much as I came to. About 30 years ago, I started studying our family, the history of our family, which little teeny bit of history there was. I found out that, I'm Irish and that my grandmothers and great great grandmothers came buzzing in there directly from Ireland. And there were others, and who my mother's families, where they came from, which was down the road, they were farmers. I love that feeling of knowing who you came from, what that goes. What are your stories? Her, and that once I started looking, then I found out things. And one thing I found out from my Aunt Katherine was about her, her mother's brother. Now, her mother was the oldest in their family, and their father was an Irishman. John Walter Cobb was his name. His mother was a Lonergan. She was directly over, you know, to come up there. Um, and she wanted to tell me something about those people. And I said, "Well, I don't know anything. How can you help? Can you help me?" "Yes, I'm going to tell you right now." She was a whack, and she was very respectful of people who served their time in World War II. I want to tell you that we have someone in our family that served in World War One, Eloise. I bet you don't know a thing about him. She was right. I'd never heard of him. I'd never heard of them talking about him. What in the world was going on? Well, what I had to learn first was that her sisters had carefully distributed or gotten rid of trashed papers as they were cleaning out a house or they were moving somebody. They had, texted things and gotten it out of the way so that there'd be neatness. Well, there was a lot of neatness, and when the neatness was there, you didn't know what had been there before you. So Cocky, that's what I called her, Cocky told me as much as she knew. He was in World War One, and I think I've been told all those years that he went to France, Eloise. And you seem to be looking for that right now. And I think you ought to get busy and find out if we really did have someone in our family that was in World War One. I don't know about that. I've never been told about it. Don't you want to know? Hey, little girl, now don't you want to know? Well, I'm not a little girl, but yes, I did. I wanted very badly to know about him. So I started asking around in the family. No, they didn't know either. Just a few. One, her sister Loretta, she knew a little bit, but not a lot, and she couldn't tell you. And then she had a picture of him in his uniform, and he looked really good, but it's gone. That'll hurt your feelings when you're really looking to work out somebody and the picture's gone. I found one small picture out of a newspaper with him in his uniform standing up against the barracks. That's all I've got. That's all that was left. Isn't that irritating? That was all that was left. That's what stories are all about, is the stories. You can remember them this way. You can remember people, especially from your family. So I kept on looking and finding things. And then about, oh, 8 or so years ago, I was in Charlotte for a visit and I went to the downtown library. They have a fantastic library there and they have a wonderful Carolina room. And I explained to the librarian what I had done and I showed her and all of the family work that I had done and left with them. And she was willing to help me. So she came back in about an hour. I was working on some things and she went to look. And she came back having printed several papers that were copies from the Charlotte Observer. Well, that was a happy day for me. It was 2 or 3 letters that John Walter Cobb Jr. had sent home from France. The first letter that he sent to his family was about the ship going over and that it was part time rough water and part time good, and that now he was out with his buddies and that they were laid, they had a place and they had jobs and they were getting to know what they had to do. And he tells us he liked being there in France. It was where he should be. And that's what happened. And I found out about him through finding those letters. In 1930, his mother went to his, oh, I should tell you first. He wrote in October of the next year, 1918, and told them he thought he'd be coming home soon. He didn't come home. He caught the flu, was in a trench. He was spreading just like crazy, picking off the people who had gotten it. And he's buried in French ground. Now, they had to do that temporarily, not in a cemetery, but just where they were burying the bodies of the dead. But when the time came along, San Mihiel, he was buried at the San Mihiel Cemetery, the American Military Cemetery. And what went along with that was at the parents' choose. They could have the body sent home or they could have them buried in France. And if they were buried in France and the parent, the mother or the wife, wanted to come over to say goodbye to their sons, the government sent them over on a boat. It was a pilgrimage. Lots of people went, and my grandmother went. My great grandmother went in 1930 to see her son. She had come, her grandmother had come directly from Tipperary. And so there they were. I mean, it was wonderful. It was hard. It was hard for those women to go. It was hard for those women to say goodbye to their sons. They knew that they were gone, but to come and refresh it and go over there and say goodbye. And then, so far as I could find out afterwards, there'd been no other visitations. You know, there weren't big parties for him over there on that. So in 1917, I went with my son and my daughter, and we went over there to say goodbye to John Cobb. It's a beautiful place. America is doing a beautiful thing, and the French are wonderful. They were absolutely wonderful. And after that, through walking around that cemetery, I learned that a lot of people left their person there, but they left notes saying that there was a plot with their family and that they had a stone in their cemetery in the United States telling who was there, because there'll always be a place. A person will walk up that doesn't know anything about it and say, "Well, who's that one? I never heard of that. Who's that one?" And I used to tell people, when I put that stone down, I left an address. And I did. 2 years ago, the day of the celebration of the 100th year of the end of World War One, the stone that I had brought back was in place on the family plot. His parents were there, others. And my son, Jim, and my cousin, Trip, who's from the Navy, and my son is retired from the Army. And the three of us went to that plot so that we could say goodbye to him and maybe start something so that people would look for him or for others in that cemetery in Charlotte or all over, where you might find someone that you're proud of and that you want to remember, and you want to tell stories about them and their families. Thank you for listening. I hope that this weekend and afterwards is very, very good. Take care.